Okay, we'll get started here. Welcome to North County. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and thank all of you for being here this afternoon. I was hoping that this would be a standing room only event because it would tell me that you care deeply about this college and what we do and what we're being faced with during this particular budget and fiscal crisis. If you had not been here, I would be deeply concerned about each of our commitments to not only the college and our students, but to each other. But you're here. And I know there are many people that can't be here today. That's why we're videoing this event, and the video will be posted on our website along with the PowerPoint, so people who cannot be here will have the opportunity to hear the same comments and see the same information so that they can be as fully informed as possible. So what I had laid out during the open budget forums with the College Council and the Planning and Budget Committee was a timeline which would culminate in a presentation to the Board of Trustees on May 11th, at which time I would share with the Board my recommendations for how we were going to meet and deal with the state budget shortfall, as well as our own internal structural deficit that we've been dealing with. Because at the June 8th meeting, the Board of Trustees must approve a tentative budget. Because if they don't, we cannot write checks on July 1st. So backing up from that process of that timeline is why we are where we are today and why we've been doing what we've been doing over the last 2 months. So what I'm going to present to you today is where we are today in terms of the information we have, the work that's been done by you and by your management representative and the administration, and that has been processed and reviewed by the Budget Committee, adding its own recommendations to me for my consideration as I put together a recommended budget reduction plan. We have 2 parts to this plan. Coming away from our planning a budget process, it was very clear that we have a continual annual structural deficit. And what that means is that every year we're faced with inflationary costs, whether it be servicing the salary schedule, whether it be external influences such as rate increases from workers' comp, unemployment insurance, or whether it's inflationary costs due to goods and services that we continue to purchase, or energy costs as they continue to rise. Now, in normal years, we would get usually some kind of new income, either in the form of growth, for which we have to spend on classes in order to earn the growth in student enrollment, or in the far distant past, we used to hear a thing called COLA, where the state would actually give us a cost of living adjustment to compensate for those inflationary factors. Well, both of those particular entities have been absent. So if you can picture this, for every salary dollar that we distribute in servicing the salary schedule, we have to find $1.20 in order to pay for that dollar, because on top of it comes the employer costs of all those other percentages. So if we don't take that into consideration, we don't address the issue that for every $1.20 we add to our budget, we have to find another $1.20 to take out of our budget. And we haven't been doing that as a college because we're not used to that. That's not part of our culture. Our part of our culture is continue to grow and build and add to and develop. But we have to stop that practice. And so one of the recommendations I received on Tuesday from the Planning and Budget Committee is to consider an annual exercise in identifying what that structural deficit will be, and we address that absolutely the first thing every year. We have to find the resources to cover the structural debt. Now, we've had a luxury these last couple of years of having a contingency account. If you recall, back in 2008-9, the college grew and we hit 10,000 full-time equivalent students. And with that, we transformed ourselves from a small college to a medium college. And as we did that, there was an infusion of new money at $1.1 million for 4 years, as called stabilization money. But to keep that infusion in your base, you had to retain the level of 10,000 or more full-time equivalent students. Well, just as we achieved that level, if you recall, in the summer of 2009 and in the fall of 2009, we were hit with a budget reduction in terms of workload reduction. So instead of our funded target of being 9,650, it was suddenly 9,200. And the opportunity for us to have enough money to grow enough to hit 10,000 again was very unlikely. So therefore, those 4 increments of $1.1 million no longer became part of our base. They became one-time only dollars. And we have been living on those $1.1 million over the last 2.5 years to offset the structural deficit. Well, that money runs out. That money runs out. And if we don't address it on a continual basis, we will find ourselves in more difficult, if we don't develop a practice to solve that structural deficit, we will continue to be in a fiscal crisis. So the first thing that we needed to do in terms of addressing the budget reduction is to address the structural deficit. Now, the structural deficit was originally defined to be $754,000. But I've added another $200,000 on top of that, because one of the structural deficits that the institution has not solved is the shortfall of funding for DSPS. And if you recall, over the last 3 years, since the state cut almost 60% of the state funding for DSPS, the college was already contributing out of the general fund over $300,000 to support our Disabled Student Services program. There were reductions made. There were more reductions that were tried to be made, but were not supported by the board at that time. And therefore, the college incurred almost $250,000 in addition to the $300,000+. We've been working on that over the last 2 years. We made some staff reductions. We made some program reductions, and we had gotten it down to about $90,000 until this year we got a late notice that what we were told we were going to get was shorted by about $97,000. So at the April 6th board meeting, I had to ask the board to allow us to use $97,000 of general fund money to finish out the year in DSPS. So that's still up around $200,000. So we have to address that. That's not going to go away, and it could get worse. Now, in approaching these two challenges, one is the structural deficit, and one is the other challenge, which is the 9.1% reduction as part of the state reduction in funding for community colleges. I set about looking at some guiding principles. What was it that is going to shape my thinking, shape the conversations, and shape my decision making in regard to making recommendations?